My name is Charmaine, and I am 31 years old. If you asked my family who the responsible one was, they'd say it was me, and they'd say it like it was a compliment. Like being reliable was some shiny medal they pinned on my chest. But I learned a long time ago that in my family, responsible didn't mean respected. It meant useful. It meant I was the one they called when something needed fixing, when money was short, when plans were falling apart, when the details were too annoying for them to handle. I was the one who made things work, and the reward for that was watching them act like it all happened naturally, like the universe simply bent to their convenience. I didn't become that person because I wanted to. I became her because no one else would. When my mom decided family togetherness mattered, it always came with an asterisk. Togetherness meant everyone showing up, laughing, taking photos, eating brunch in her crowded kitchen, and pretending we didn't have a history of one-sided effort. It meant my older brother, Marcus, telling loud stories and soaking up attention like it was oxygen. It meant my younger sister, Elena, half present, scrolling through her phone, chiming in only when something benefited her. And it meant me quietly making sure the coffee was refilled and the bills were paid, even if no one asked. That Sunday brunch started like every other one. Mom's kitchen smelled like bacon and burnt toast. The countertops were cluttered with plates and napkins and a bowl of fruit nobody would touch. The air was warm from the oven and loud from everyone talking at once. Marcus was telling some work story, laughing at his own jokes before anyone else had a chance. Mom stood at the stove with that satisfied hostess smile, like she loved the illusion of being the center of a happy family. Elena sat at the table with her phone tilted toward her lap, her thumbs moving fast. She barely looked up when I walked in, but she smiled enough to pass as affectionate. I told myself not to read into it. I told myself we were doing better lately. I told myself the beach trip would be good for all of us. The beach trip had been my idea, technically, but in the way that mattered, it was theirs. They'd been talking about getting away together for months. Mom wanted somewhere with a pool and easy beach access. Marcus wanted a resort that looked good in pictures. Elena wanted a place close to nightlife. They kept sending me links and opinions and vague requests, and every time they ended with the same phrase. Can you just handle it? So I did. I found the resort after hours of searching. I called and negotiated a group rate. I secured the rooms through my booking account because it was the only one with enough points and a clean history. I paid the deposits because they would pay me back, the same promise I'd heard 100 times. I built an itinerary with little extras they'd enjoy. Dinner reservations, a sunset cruise, a list of local spots so Marcus could pretend he'd discovered them. I sent it all into the group chat with a bright, hopeful energy, and I let myself believe we were building something together. That was the stupid part, because they weren't building anything with me. They were building something on me. At brunch, there was a lull in the noise, a brief pause where plates clinked and someone refilled juice. I smiled, genuinely excited, and said what had been sitting on my tongue all morning. I can't wait for our beach trip next week. I said it like it was obvious, like of course I was going, like of course this was ours. Marcus leaned back in his chair and laughed. Not a warm laugh, but a sharp one, like I'd accidentally walked into the punchline of a joke everyone else already knew. "Oh," he said, grinning wide, "you thought you were invited." For a second, my brain refused to process the words. I looked at him the way you look at someone who just said something so absurd it has to be a mistake. Then Mom smiled, not embarrassed, not surprised, just pleased, like this was a gentle correction she was offering to a child who misunderstood. "It's more of a family-only thing," she said. Family only. Like I was some outsider they'd been humoring. Like I was a neighbor who'd gotten too comfortable. Like I wasn't the reason the trip existed in the first place. I didn't speak. Not because I didn't have words, but because I knew exactly how it would go if I used them. If I argued, Mom would say I was being dramatic. Marcus would say I couldn't take a joke. Elena would stare at her phone and pretend she wasn't involved. They'd twist the narrative until I was the problem for being hurt, not them for being cruel. So I set my fork down. I stood up, and I left. I heard someone call my name as I stepped out the door. It might have been Mom. It might have been Elena. It didn't matter. I didn't owe them a scene. I didn't owe them tears. I didn't owe them anything, not after months of acting like a travel agent, a financial cushion, and an emotional sponge. By the time I reached my car, my hands were steady. That was what scared me most. I wasn't angry in the usual way, the kind that burns hot and makes you reckless. I was calm, Clear. Done. The kind of calm that comes right before you stop caring about keeping things nice. The drive home was quiet enough that I could hear my own heartbeat. My phone buzzed in the cup holder with group chat notifications. I didn't look. I already knew what they'd be. The same cheerful planning messages, the same links, the same, "Can you confirm this?" as if nothing had happened. As if I hadn't just been told, to my face, that I wasn't family in the way they meant it. When I got home, I didn't even take my shoes off. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and pulled up the resort confirmation email. My name was everywhere. My card, my email, my account, the point of contact, the person responsible, the person who could change everything with a few clicks. Canceling it right then would have been too clean, too simple. They'd shrug, book somewhere else, and tell everyone I overreacted again. They'd still get their trip. They'd still get their pictures. They'd still get to treat me like the villain while enjoying what I built. No, I wanted them to feel what it was like to realize, at the worst possible moment, that the person you used was also the person who held the power. I stared at the confirmation number for a long time, thinking about the way Marcus laughed, the way Mom smiled, the way Elena didn't defend me. I thought about all the years I'd swallowed irritation to keep the peace, all the times I'd said yes because saying no would make me difficult. Then I opened a new tab and searched the resort's direct reservation line. My finger hovered over the call button, and I realized something with a clarity that made my pulse steady instead of shaky. They didn't just exclude me. They excluded the version of me who would fix it, the version of me who would smooth it over, the version of me who would keep them comfortable. That version of me was gone, and in that quiet, I knew exactly what I was going to do next. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was second-guessing myself, but because my brain wouldn't stop replaying the moment at brunch, like a looping clip. Marcus laughing like I was stupid for assuming I belonged. Mom smiling like excluding me was a reasonable boundary instead of a betrayal. Elena watching it happen and letting it happen, her silence louder than anything she could have said. By midnight, the anger I expected still hadn't arrived in the dramatic, fiery way it usually did. What I felt was colder, cleaner. Like a switch had flipped and suddenly I could see my family the way strangers would see them if they'd watched that brunch scene without all the history to soften it. Useful, that's what I'd been. And the minute I stopped being useful, I became optional. I stared at the resort confirmation again, reading over the details I'd arranged with such care. The room list, the check-in date, the total cost sitting there like an accusation. My name attached to everything, the person who made it happen, the person who could unmake it just as easily. Canceling would have been too obvious, too merciful. It would give them time to scramble, time to pivot, time to turn the story into one where I threw a tantrum and ruined their vacation. They'd make me the villain and still somehow come out looking like victims who were simply trying to enjoy a family-only trip. No, if they wanted to pretend I didn't exist, then I wanted them to experience exactly what life looked like when I wasn't there to protect them from inconvenience. So I decided to do it slowly, surgically. I waited until the next morning when I knew they'd all be at work or busy, when no one would be hovering over their phones, when my calls wouldn't be interrupted by buzzing group chat drama. I made coffee, sat at my desk, and called the resort directly. A cheerful receptionist answered, and I asked to be transferred to reservations. I could hear waves faintly in the background, some distant seaside noise that made the resort sound like a dream. I imagined my family stepping into that lobby a week later, smiling, confident, already posting photos. The reservations manager introduced herself as Claire. Her voice was friendly in a professional way, like she dealt with stressed-out travelers all day and had learned how to make anything sound easy. "How can I help you?" she asked. I glanced at the confirmation number. "Hi, Claire. I'm calling about a group booking. There's been a mix-up with the dates." "Oh, no," she said immediately, sympathetic. "Let's take a look. What's the confirmation number?" I gave it to her. She typed for a moment. "Yes," she said. "I see the booking. You're set for check-in next week. What's the issue?" I kept my tone polite, casual, like this was an innocent scheduling hiccup. "The group's flights were delayed," I lied smoothly. "We actually won't be arriving until 3 days later than planned. I need to push the check-in to Friday." "Not a problem," Claire said, like she was thrilled to fix it. "We can adjust that." A pause. More typing. "All right," she confirmed. "The rooms will now be held for Friday check-in instead. If your party arrives earlier, they'll have to make other arrangements for those first 3 nights." I felt my pulse steady. Perfect. Claire even added, "I'm so sorry for the inconvenience this might cause your family." The word family nearly made me laugh. I thanked her, then asked one more thing in a voice that sounded harmless, but carried intent. "Can you keep the original confirmation number active in the system?" I said, "just in case anyone checks it or references it." "Of course," she replied. "It'll still show in the system, but with the updated dates." That mattered, because I didn't want the front desk to say, "Your booking was canceled." I wanted them to say politely, neutrally, "Your check-in isn't until Friday." I wanted confusion, a slow burn, a situation that felt like it could still be fixed, as long as they could find the right person to bully into fixing it. And that person was me, or at least it used to be. When I hung up, I opened the family group chat and stared at the name at the top, the little circle of faces that always felt like a warning sign more than a warm invitation. I didn't leave the chat. I muted it. I wanted to read everything later, every frantic message, every accusation, every desperate demand. But I didn't want to hear it in the meantime. Silence, I realized, was a form of control. Then I did the second part. The part that felt petty on paper but poetic in execution. I searched online for the kind of motel you never choose unless you have no other option. The kind with buzzing neon lights and blurry photos. The kind with reviews that mention thin walls and management issues and water pressure. I found one about 15 minutes from the resort, close enough to tempt them, far enough to sting. I booked one room in my mother's name. 1. Prepaid, non-refundable. Not enough for everyone, not enough for comfort. Just enough to force a decision that would make them turn on each other. I didn't specify who it was for. I didn't attach instructions. I didn't warn anyone. I simply closed my laptop and went about my day like nothing had happened. And the strangest part was how calm I felt. Like I'd been holding my breath for years and finally exhaled. The morning of their check-in arrived faster than I expected. I woke up early without an alarm. The kind of early rise you get when your body knows something interesting is about to happen. I moved slowly, deliberately, made coffee, ate toast, read the news. Outside my window, the sky was overcast, but I imagined the coast was sunny and bright, the kind of weather my family always claimed they deserved. By then, I pictured them loading up cars with luggage, Mom making sure everyone had snacks, acting like the coordinator, Marcus behind the wheel, playing music, cracking jokes, taking credit for a trip he hadn't planned. Elena in the back seat, posting Beach Week on her story before they even arrived. They had no idea their confidence was about to collapse. Around 9:45, the first notification popped up. I didn't open it. 5 minutes later, another. Then another. By 10:30, my phone looked like it was vibrating with urgency. 8 unread messages. That told me they had arrived early, exactly as planned. I took a sip of coffee and finally opened the chat. The messages hit like a wave. Marcus, bro, what's going on? Mom, they say we can't check in until Friday. Elena, this is so embarrassing. We've been standing here forever. Mom, Charmaine, please tell me this is a mistake. Then the caps lock arrived, like panic turning into rage. Marcus, call me right now. Mom, Charmaine, fix this now. Elena, this is insane. We have all our stuff. My phone started ringing immediately. Marcus, I let it ring out. Mom, I let it ring out. Elena. That one I answered after the second ring, not because I cared more, but because I wanted at least one of them to hear me say it. The background noise was chaos, voices overlapping, a baby crying somewhere, a sharp echo, like someone had slammed a suitcase down. Elena's voice came through like a siren. What the hell is happening? She snapped. They're saying you changed the booking dates. We have the kids, all our stuff, and nowhere to sleep. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't explain. I didn't defend myself. I just spoke calmly, like I was repeating a line from a script they'd written first. Oh, I said softly. You thought you were invited. Silence. 10 full seconds where the world seemed to stop on the other end of the line. Then she whispered, almost disbelieving, Are you serious? I didn't answer. The call ended with a sharp click. I set my phone down and stared at the coffee mug in my hands, feeling something I hadn't expected. Not triumph. Not joy. Settled. Like a debt had been acknowledged, not paid, but finally recognized. Over the next hour, the chat turned into a battlefield. Mom demanded I fix it. Marcus argued with the front desk through the chat like they could hear him. Elena kept typing frantic, clipped messages about how humiliating it was, how people were looking at them, how the clerk was being rude. I watched the chaos unfold without responding, imagining their faces, the way they'd be blaming each other already. Then the tone shifted. The frantic messages stopped for a while, replaced by a tense silence. That meant they were in problem-solving mode. Heads bent over phones, Mom calling other hotels, Marcus searching for anything available, Elena sighing and muttering about how this never would have happened if I had just handled it like usual. They didn't know it yet, but the only place that had a solution waiting was the motel. When they finally found it, the messages started again. Elena, what is this place? Marcus, there's one room. Mom, we can't stay here. Marcus, I'll get us something else. Then a photo. Elena snapped the front of the motel and posted it in the chat like evidence at a trial. The sign was sun-bleached and peeling, and half the neon didn't work. The curtains in the windows looked yellowed, like they'd absorbed years of cigarette smoke. I zoomed in and saw a cat stretched out on the hood of someone's car like it owned the whole place. A part of me almost felt bad. Almost. But then I remembered my mother smiling when she told me the beach trip was family only, and the softness evaporated. I expected the motel to be the punchline and nothing more. But the universe decided to add layers. When they went to check in, the desk clerk told them the room wasn't ready. Cleaning was running late, which sounded like a lie built from habit. Mom tried to push. She raised her voice. The clerk threatened to call the police. Marcus had to drag her outside. So they sat in the parking lot with their suitcases, sweating in the heat, waiting like people who had nowhere else to go. Then the tour bus arrived. 40 college kids, loud and sunburned, and already cracking open beers before they'd even gotten their keys. The parking lot turned into chaos. Coolers dragged across gravel, music blasting from portable speakers, laughter bouncing off the thin motel walls. By the time my family finally got into their room, their neighbors were throwing a pre-party in the hallway. The walls were so thin that every shout, every thump of bass, every slam of a door seeped right through. And then hours later, the water went out. A burst pipe behind the building, according to the clerk. No repairs until maybe tomorrow. No showers. No flushing toilets. Nothing. The group chat erupted again. Elena, I can't do this. Mom, Charmaine, you're being cruel. Marcus, this isn't funny anymore. Mom, fix it. Then the message that made me exhale slowly through my nose. Elena, a cockroach just crawled across my pillow. I set my phone face down on the counter and let them sit in it. Out there, my family was crammed together in a sweltering motel room with no water, no privacy, and noise pouring in from every direction. They were uncomfortable, exhausted, and furious. And for the first time in years, their disaster wasn't mine to clean up. Not because I didn't know how, because I finally refused. I thought the motel would be the worst of it. I was wrong. By the second night, the group chat had stopped being about me entirely. They'd turned on each other, and that was something I recognized instantly. That was what happened when I wasn't there to absorb the tension. Without a designated fixer, the blame ricocheted around the room, landing on whoever was closest. Marcus started it. You're the one who said we should stay here instead of driving back, he wrote. The edge in his words unmistakable, even through text. Mom fired back almost immediately. Because someone didn't bother double-checking the reservation like Charmaine always does. There it was. Even in crisis, my role was still the measuring stick. Elena chimed in a minute later. Are you seriously fighting right now? I'm on the floor next to the bathroom and there's something moving in the carpet. That message sat there unanswered for a while. Then photos started coming in, like evidence from a crime scene. A trash can overflowing in the hallway. A towel stained with something I couldn't identify. The corner of the ceiling where water damage had spread into dark, jagged shapes. Each image felt like a silent admission that maybe, just maybe, they should have thought twice before deciding they didn't need me. Hours passed like that, bursts of passive-aggressive comments, long silences, then more fighting. I didn't respond to a single one. Around 8 that evening, Elena sent a video. It was shaky, filmed from close to the floor. I could see Marcus standing over her, gesturing wildly toward Mom, who sat rigidly on the bed with her arms crossed. Their voices overlapped in angry, muffled shouting, too loud and too emotional to make out clearly, but the tone said everything. Accusations, deflection, old resentments finally surfacing without anyone there to redirect them. I watched the video once, then I closed it. That was when I decided to do something I hadn't originally planned. I picked up my phone and called the motel. The same desk clerk answered, his voice gravelly, like he'd been smoking since the 70s. I told him I needed to cancel the room for the following night. He said he couldn't because the reservation was under someone else's name. I have the payment information, I said calmly. There was a pause. I could hear him tapping keys. When I rattled off the card number I'd used, his tone changed. All right, he said. It's canceled. No warning for them, no explanation, just a countdown. Checkout time was 11 the next morning. I set my phone down and went to bed. I slept deeply, the kind of sleep you get when your mind finally stops bracing for impact. The next morning, my phone was already lighting up. Mom, what did you do? Marcus, we're being told we have to leave. Elena, seriously, this is low. I didn't answer. At 11 sharp, they were out. That was when the weather turned. A storm rolled in off the coast, sudden and aggressive. Heavy rain lashed the roads. Wind bent palm trees sideways. Thunder rattled windows hard enough that I could almost feel it from miles away. Every hotel they called gave them the same answer. Fully booked. They tried to wait it out in the car, but the rain only intensified. Marcus suggested driving inland. Mom refused, saying she wasn't spending hours on the road in weather like that. Elena wanted to go home. Another argument erupted, louder this time, sharper, fueled by exhaustion and the realization that they'd gambled and lost. By mid-afternoon, they gave up. They drove back. The group chat went silent for the rest of the day, and that silence felt heavier than the shouting. Silence meant defeat. It meant there was no version of this story where they came out looking good. Just before midnight, a single message appeared from Mom. We need to talk. I didn't open it. I turned my phone off and went to bed, the quiet wrapping around me like armor. For the first time in years, I slept without that familiar knot in my stomach, the one that came from anticipating everyone else's needs before my own. 2 days passed before I saw them in person. Mom texted again. Marcus once, Elena not at all. I didn't respond to any of them. On Wednesday evening, there was a knock at my door. I knew who it would be before I opened it. Marcus stood there, arms crossed, his expression worn down to something between frustration and embarrassment. Mom hovered just behind him, holding an umbrella even though it wasn't raining. Elena stayed in the car, her face turned toward the window like she didn't want to be seen. Marcus started talking before I could say a word. We need to put this behind us, he said. You made your point. I stepped aside and let them in without answering. Mom glanced around my living room like she was trying to place herself in it again, like she hadn't been there in years. She sat on the edge of the couch and smoothed the fabric of her jacket, a nervous habit I'd seen 100 times. We're ready to move forward, she said carefully, as if she were offering a truce. I listened. I listened to Mom say it was all a misunderstanding, to Marcus say they didn't think I'd even want to come, to excuses layered so neatly they almost sounded rehearsed. I let them talk until there was nothing left to say. Then I spoke. I believed you, I said quietly, at brunch. I believed you when you said it was family only. They stiffened. If that's how you see it, I continued, then maybe I'm not family in the way you mean. And if that's true, I'm done pretending otherwise. Mom opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. Marcus looked like he wanted to interrupt, but something in my expression stopped him. I'm done planning your trips, I said. Done fixing your mistakes. Done being the safety net you don't even acknowledge. Mom stood abruptly, muttering something about thinking this over. Marcus followed her without another word. Through the window, I saw Elena glance up from the car. For a moment, our eyes met. She didn't look angry. She didn't look guilty. She looked conflicted. Then they drove away. That night, the group chat stayed silent. But early the next morning, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Elena. No text, no explanation. Just a screenshot. A confirmation for a different resort booking. My name listed under guest. The date was 2 months away. I stared at it for a long time, my chest tight with suspicion. Was it a peace offering or another setup? Either way, I didn't respond. Not yet, because something about it felt unfinished. And I had learned the hard way not to step back into their plans without understanding the cost. When Elena sent that screenshot, I didn't respond. Not a thumbs up, not a question mark, not even a scene. I wanted to know what would happen if I didn't immediately step back into the role they were used to. The one who reassured them, the one who clarified, the one who made things easier just by engaging. For a few days, nothing happened. Then Marcus texted, "You're coming, right? No pressure." No pressure is always pressure. I ignored it. The next day, Mom left a voicemail. Her voice was softer than it had been in weeks, like she was trying a different tactic. She said they'd worked hard to include me this time, that they were trying to rebuild, that I should see this trip as a step forward. I deleted the voicemail without listening to it again. Still, the screenshot gnawed at me. 2 months away. A different resort. My name listed as a guest. No details about rooms. No mention of who else was going. It felt incomplete in a way that made my skin prickle, like someone had left a door half open on purpose, hoping curiosity would do the rest. A week before the supposed trip, curiosity won. Not because I was planning to go. At least that's what I told myself. I called the resort listed in the screenshot, gave them the confirmation number, asked for details like it was routine. The woman on the line typed for a moment. "Yes," she said. "We have you booked in an oceanfront king suite for the full week." Just me. I waited for her to add something. Another room. Adjoining reservations. A group booking. She didn't. "And the rest of my party?" I asked carefully. She paused. Typed again. "There are no other bookings under your last name. No additional rooms attached to that confirmation." I thanked her and hung up, staring at my phone like it had just spoken another language. They'd booked me a solo suite, either as a guilt gift or because they weren't going at all. Neither option felt comforting. 3 days before the check-in date, a small padded envelope appeared at my door. No return address. Inside was a clear plastic sleeve holding a single resort keycard and a folded piece of paper. I recognized the handwriting immediately. "Just go. You'll understand. Elena." I sat on my couch for a long time, the keycard resting in my palm. My first instinct was to throw it in a drawer and forget about it. The second was to text Elena demanding an explanation. But something deeper, quieter, told me neither reaction would get me the truth. If this was another trap, walking into it on my terms was better than being dragged in blind. So I packed a bag. Light, neutral, like I might be leaving early. I didn't tell anyone. The drive to the coast was almost peaceful, which felt wrong given the tension buzzing under my skin. The weather was perfect. Blue sky, warm breeze. The kind of day my family loved to claim as proof that life was good, even when it wasn't. The keycard sat in the cup holder, catching the light every time I shifted gears. At the resort, the lobby was quiet. Polished floors, soft music. A receptionist smiled at me and greeted me by name before I even handed over my ID. "Welcome, Ms. Charmaine," she said. "Your room is ready. The rest of your group has already arrived." My stomach dropped. "I'm sorry," I said. "Can you clarify what you mean by group?" She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice like this was a shared secret. "They asked us to let you know they're waiting in the suite." I didn't ask who. I already knew. The elevator ride felt longer than it should have. The soft instrumental music only made my pulse louder in my ears. When the doors opened on the top floor, the hallway smelled faintly of sunscreen and ocean air. I walked toward the suite at the end, my footsteps muffled by the carpet. The green light flashed when I slid the keycard in. I opened the door. The curtains were pulled wide, sunlight flooding the room. 2 champagne flutes sat on the table, already poured. A folder lay between them, thick with papers. And standing by the window was Elena, alone. She turned when she heard the door and let out a breath she'd clearly been holding. "I didn't bring them," she said immediately. "I brought you here to show you something." She gestured to the folder. I didn't sit down. I didn't say anything. I just walked over and opened it. Emails, receipts, bank statements. Page after page showing charges I didn't recognize at first, until the pattern snapped into focus. Resort bookings, car rentals, grocery orders, all tied to vacations I hadn't gone on, all charged to my accounts. My accounts. "They've been doing this for years," Elena said quietly. "I only found out because Mom asked me to help her with online banking. I saw your name everywhere." "How long?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "Almost 5 years." 5 years. Thousands of dollars. I flipped through these pages, my hands numb. Every time I thought I'd reached the end, there was more. Another charge. Another accidental expense I'd never noticed because I trusted them, because I didn't think I needed to check. "I couldn't stay complicit," Elena said. "I know I've been quiet before. I know that hurt you, but this crossed a line I couldn't ignore." I looked up at her then. She wasn't defensive. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was done, just like I was. We spent hours going through everything, reconstructing timelines, matching dates to trips I remembered them taking without me. By the time the sun started to set, my head was spinning. But I was clear. This wasn't just emotional betrayal. It was financial. And it was deliberate. I left the resort the next morning with copies of everything and a calm resolve that felt heavier than anger. I didn't confront Mom. I didn't call Marcus. I didn't announce what I knew. Instead, I made an appointment with a lawyer. Because if they thought excluding me from a beach trip was the worst thing they could do, they had no idea what was coming next. I didn't confront them. That was the first decision I made after leaving the resort, and it was the hardest one to stick to. Every instinct in me wanted to march back into that family group chat and unload everything I knew. I wanted to ask how long they thought they'd get away with it. I wanted to hear them scramble, deny, and rewrite the past in real time. But I already knew how that would end. They would say it was a misunderstanding. They would say I'd agreed and just forgotten. They would say it was family helping family. And somehow, by the end of it, I'd be the one questioning my memory instead of their behavior. So I skipped the confrontation entirely. Instead, I sat in a quiet office across from a lawyer with a calm voice and a sharp pen, and I laid everything out on the table. The emails, the receipts, the booking confirmations, the grocery charges from vacation towns I hadn't stepped foot in, the pattern that stretched back almost 5 years, neat and undeniable once you saw it all at once. She didn't look shocked. That alone told me everything. "This is clear misuse of your accounts," she said, flipping through the documents. "And because it was done without your consent, it's actionable." I asked what that meant exactly. She explained my options carefully. Demand repayment. File a civil suit. Potentially pursue fraud charges if they refuse to cooperate. The words sounded heavy, like they belonged to someone else's life, not mine. I'd spent so long being the one who fixed problems quietly that the idea of escalating anything felt unnatural. But this wasn't escalation. It was correction. We drafted formal demand letters that afternoon. Polite, professional, unemotional. They laid out the facts, the amounts owed, and the deadline. 60 days. Repayment in full, or we proceed with legal action. No threats. No pleading. Just consequences. The letters went out in official stamped envelopes. Not texts, not emails. Something tangible they couldn't ignore or pretend hadn't arrived. The family group chat exploded within hours. Mom: "Charmaine, this is insane. We're family." Marcus: "You can't seriously be doing this." Mom: "Call me right now." I didn't respond. A few minutes later, Elena left the chat. No announcement, no explanation, just gone. That small act carried more weight than anything she could have said. 2 days later, Marcus showed up at my door. He didn't knock so much as hover, like he wasn't sure he was allowed to be there anymore. When I opened the door, he tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "This is a bit much," he said, crossing his arms. "Don't you think?" I stepped aside but didn't invite him in. "If you want to talk," I said calmly, "you can do it through my lawyer." The words stopped him cold. His mouth opened, then closed. He tried again. "We can work this out like adults." "I am," I replied. "That's why there's a paper trail." He stood there for a few seconds longer, then left without another word. Mom tried a different approach. She left voicemails, long ones, emotional ones. She talked about how hurt she was, how she never meant to cause harm, how I was tearing the family apart over money. She cried. She talked about my childhood. She reminded me of sacrifices I hadn't asked her to make. I saved every voicemail. I didn't listen to them twice. Weeks passed. The anger in the chat softened into desperation. Marcus tried one more time, sending a message that started with, "Let's not do anything we'll regret." I archived it without replying. At the 45-day mark, something unexpected happened. The money arrived. Not in pieces, not with conditions, not with a message attached. A full wire transfer. Every dollar. I stared at the confirmation on my phone for a long time, waiting for some feeling to surface. Triumph. Relief. Validation. What I felt instead was emptiness. They paid because they knew they were caught, not because they were sorry. There was no apology, no explanation, just silence, like they hoped settling the balance would erase the offense. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. Last night, just as I was getting ready for bed, my phone buzzed with a single message. It was from Elena. "They're planning something," it read. "Don't let your guard down." No details, no follow-up, just a warning hanging in the air. I locked my doors, changed my passwords, backed up every file to 2 separate drives. The calm I'd been living in sharpened into something else. Awareness. Because repayment wasn't remorse. It was containment. And families like mine didn't give up control quietly. They just waited for a better angle. I didn't reply to Elena's warning. Not because I didn't believe her, but because I finally understood something important. Every time I reacted quickly, every time I rushed to confront or explain or fix, I handed my family exactly what they wanted: leverage, access, a chance to spin the narrative before I could anchor it in truth. So instead, I slowed everything down. I changed every password connected to my finances: banking apps, booking accounts, email logins, cloud storage. I enabled two-factor authentication on everything and removed any saved cards from shared platforms. I ordered a credit report and froze my credit, just in case someone decided desperation justified one last reach. I didn't tell them. I didn't warn them. I simply disappeared from their systems. The quiet that followed felt different this time. Not tense, not heavy, watchful. Like the moment before a storm breaks or dissipates for good. 2 days later, the attempt came. It was subtle, almost lazy. A password reset request sent to an old email address Mom used to help me organize years ago. If I hadn't already changed everything, I might have missed it. Might have brushed it off as spam. I forwarded it straight to my lawyer. She didn't sound surprised when I called. "Good," she said, "now we know." That afternoon, she sent a second round of letters. Not requests this time, warnings. Clear language outlining that any further attempts to access my accounts would be documented as harassment and potential fraud. Copies were sent to each of them individually, not as a group. No room to hide behind collective confusion. The group chat stayed silent. Marcus didn't show up again. Mom didn't call. For the first time since this started, there was no backlash, no explosion, no dramatic confrontation. Just absence. And that was when it finally hit me. They weren't angry because I'd hurt them. They were angry because I'd stopped being available. A week passed, then 2. Life began filling the spaces they'd occupied for years. Evenings without tension, weekends without obligations disguised as favors. I noticed how much mental energy I'd been spending on anticipating their needs, their moods, their crises. Without that constant drain, everything felt lighter. Elena checked in quietly a few times, not to gossip, not to stir things up, just to say she was holding firm on her own boundaries too, that she'd stopped sharing information with Mom, that she was figuring things out for herself. We weren't suddenly close, but we were honest. One night, while cleaning out an old drawer, I found a printed copy of the original beach itinerary I'd made months ago, color-coded, carefully planned, every detail accounted for. I laughed softly when I saw it, not because it was funny, but because it felt like evidence from a past life. The version of me who made that document thought love was proven through effort. The version of me now knew better. Love doesn't require invisibility. Family doesn't get to treat you like infrastructure. And peace doesn't come from winning. It comes from leaving the game entirely. I don't know what my family will do next. Maybe they'll try again in a year. Maybe they'll pretend none of this happened. Maybe they'll tell a story where I'm the villain who changed. They're allowed to. I'm allowed to be gone. Because the truth is, the beach trip wasn't the betrayal. It was the reveal. It showed me who they were when they thought I wasn't looking, and who I became the moment I stopped covering for them. And for the first time in my adult life, I'm not waiting for the next message, the next demand, the next crisis. I'm building a life that doesn't require my absence to function. Whatever they're planning now, they'll have to do it without me. And that finally feels like freedom.